Hello everybody, welcome to the first, in what feels like forever, new Magic the Gathering Alter tutorial video. It's been forever since I've done one of these, but this is a special occasion because Commander Legends just dropped. It is upon us, and this Oloro, am I saying it right? Oloro, is actually commissioned by a friendly fellow named Patrick. So thanks so much for your patronage, Patrick. Very much appreciated. And we're going to transform this guy into a full art extended border. We're going to customize it. And as always, if you've watched my previous videos, what we did was we sanded down the bits that we're going to paint. So the entirety of the border. And after sanding it down, the paint sticks a little bit better to the card. And now I'm just dropping on my very first layer just to cover up that border with kind of like a hint of what the final color is going to be. I'm trying to mix my colors as accurately as possible on my first layer, but it doesn't have to be 100% perfect because we're going to add a couple more just because the paint is a little bit transparent. We're going to have to cover it a couple times to make sure the underlying border disappears completely. Now the sky is all kind of like purpley bluish hues with some lighter parts, some darker parts. But what I like about this card is that they're kind of like divided into streaks of cloud. So there's a couple of gradients in there, but not a whole lot. And gradients are always really hard to paint. But luckily these streaks and strings of cloud, they can kind of be separated into separate colors. Creating a really fun effect, like a really cool, like, I don't know, radial effect, I suppose. But it's not too hard to paint, so if you're going to try this at home, this is I'm going to say difficulty level, maybe 5 out of 10. It's not easy, but it's also not super hard. So, yeah, just lots of variations within that sky color, but they're all separated from one another. So that makes things a little bit easier. And we're going to be reworking this guy a couple times just to make sure we cover it all up. And the closer we get to the horizon line, the more purplish, pinkish it gets. And the further we go up towards the corners, it gets more dark blue, shady, cold colors. And that same cold blue shades, they are also in the shadows here, where the foliage kind of like meets the horizon line or the foreground. And at the bottom left, there's this giant, I don't know, like stone, rock. I don't really know what it is, kind of like a crumbling tower or something. And we're going to carry that color all the way throughout the bottom because there could be all kinds of rocks lying around. Maybe there's some grass, but grass has some lighter parts and they have some darker colors. So we can just use this color to cover the entire bottom section. Doesn't matter too much for now. We just want to put a layer down so that we can cover this border. And then later on, we're going to come back in with some detailing. But for now, this is all we're doing. I got several brushes going on. This is a very flat and kind of thin brush. And with this dark blue hue, it might look a little bit darker when I'm putting it on. But sometimes colors, they kind of change when they dry out. So what I'm putting on might not be the final color that's actually turning into. And that all kind of depends on the quality of your paint. I'm using student level acrylics most of the time, which you can do wonderful things with. They can be really, really good. It's just that they are a little bit less consistent when it comes to what the color looks like when you put them on and what it actually dries into. So here again in the corners, you can see the paint that I'm putting on looks a little bit darker, but when it dries, it actually turns a little bit lighter, and then it matches the color that we're trying to get a little bit more accurately. We're just dropping some of those darker shades throughout the sky because clouds, they have some lighter parts, some darker parts. You can just drop them in wherever really. Over at the top part doesn't really matter. You can let your mind roll free. And as long as we're trying to kind of get that streaky effect where there's lines of light and lines of dark emitting from the center of the card. And you just carry on with that theme that's set with the original art. It takes a little bit of fiddling, but we will get there in the end. And as we work our way down, we make our shades lighter and lighter and lighter. And if we're working our way towards the horizon line, these shades are very much pinkish, purplish. Yeah. And I'm making sure that I'm using the very chiseled edge of the brush for these thin streaks, these thin lines. Lots of paint on the brush so that my brush is sharp. And then I'm gently pulling that paint using these horizontal strokes, maybe slightly diagonal. But I always want to make sure the brush is really sharp. If you have big blobs of paint on your brush, it's not going to work. You got to pull your brush through the paint so that you end up with a chiseled edge, a very sharp edge. And then you can create these streaks. But if you have a big blob of paint on your brush, it's just going to smudge, and we don't want that. We want sharp. The opposite of sharp is what we want for foliage. I've got this super old brush. It was so cheap from the dollar store. Came in like, I don't know, like a 5-pack or something. Super cheap. And the bristles all spread apart, kind of like spider legs. And with that spidery looking brush, it's super easy to paint foliage because all the bristles are kind of like set apart. You just kind of gently tap the brush onto the card, and all these specks of leaves and foliage, they just fall off. And we can work that pattern all the way throughout this background foliage, working our way up to the foreground. And yeah, all these specks, they just turn into foliage really, really quickly. And we're going to use that same texture here towards the bottom. I'm going to turn this into a grassy field, I think. That's coming up to the foreground. And we can use that same texture all around this bottom section, around the text box. Super easy. It's great when you can reuse your old brushes into something to make it useful again. Here I got a slightly lighter, kind of like an autumn looking brown, green color. And I'm using the same technique as before with our spidery looking brush. This one is slightly less ravaged, I suppose. And just creates a similar texture but different enough to set it apart. It's always good to mix up your brushes to get something different going on. Every brush has its own character. So the more you mix it up, the more lively your painting is going to get. Here I'm just adding another layer to that big rock wall pillar fallen over ruin. I don't really know what it is. Just to make it stand out a little bit more and make sure that everything is covered. And yeah, we're just touching up some shadowy bits all around the card, just working our way around really. You can add in as much or as little as you want, just as long as we cover the entire border. Just gentle taps to make these grassy looking textures wherever you want them. There seems to be these waterfalls, a little bit of water stream coming from the original art. So I kind of had the idea that that might run off somewhere, could be over to the right, where the stream might kind of like bend left, right, and then off the card. So I just put in a little hint of that blue. We're going to work on it a little bit more in a bit, but just to give it a little indication that I don't forget to put that in. And other than that, we're just using that same technique, horizontal strokes, gentle taps. Create these grassy looking textures, foreground of the card. Super easy, super fun. And they're very subtle because I don't really want this bit to draw too much attention. I just want it to blend in with the original art while still having, you know, the focus to go towards the big man on the throne. Here I got a little bit of, like the water in the original art isn't really blue, just beware. It's a little bit more like a purple color, like in the sky. So we're using a similar color to the sky, this purplish hue, to lay in this little stream of water. It's very tiny, it's very small, but I wanted to give it enough love so that it stands out and breaks up the grassy textures a little bit. Here I got a really small, thin brush going. Just putting in with a very shady, like grassy looking color. Just putting in a couple of shadowy bits and twigs and leaves and stuff. Once again, like I mentioned before, if you're going to mix up your brushes, you're going to have a livelier painting. So we're just going to swap to the small brush every now and then to drop in a little bit of a shadowy color. And I'm just making sure that I do it for like the edge of the water is always a little bit darker when it kind of like where the water meets the grass, it's always a little bit murky and brownish. So we just want to have like dark edges around the water to make it stand out. Using that same brush with a little bit of a grayish, purplish tree looking color, I dropped in a little bit of a trunk over there on the right, and here I've got a little bit of red added to the color to make these autumny looking red leaves, and just gently tapping left, right, make the brush swivel, and drop in all these leaves that are kind of resembling of autumn. It is autumn here in the Netherlands at the moment. If you're from the future and you're watching this in the future, it probably isn't, but I like that color a lot. I'm just tweaking the final touches over on the sky. I feel like the colors have dried into kind of what we wanted, but maybe I was a little bit off, just adding in a bit more of a grayish blue shade here and there, just to make it really blend in. And I'm using my smallest brush for this one. Not a whole lot of paint on the brush, just a smidge, and then you can blend a little bit and create more of a hazy look, I suppose. Just dropping in my signature at the bottom. That's our card for today. Hope you all had a good time watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment if you like this card. If you want me to alter one of your cards, get in touch with me. Drop a comment. Have an awesome day, everybody. See you later.